There was a time when I knew nothing of Dune. It's strange to think there was such a time. I used to have a small, white square television in my room, this cube of wonder which exposed me to so many of the movies that shaped and changed my life. Akira, Blade Runner, The Exorcist, and so many more. And this was where my Dune journey began. When David Lynch's Dune aired in the UK, I must have seen the advertisement for it on TV before it aired because I recorded it on VHS, and I'm glad I did, because that wouldn't be the last time I would watch the film. I remember once my room was being painted, and I set up a sleeping space in the living room with bedding on the floor and all my belongings, and that wondrous white cube of mine, and I would just watch Dune. I set it up so I would be hidden away watching this weird and wonderful movie, my own Fremen CH. It was my retreat, my safe space, where I could live and breathe in that world. The true watch count has been lost to time, but I know I watched it many, many times. This was a very personal, private film to me. I didn't talk about my love for Dune with anyone, not even my own family, for years. I just held this great love for it. At uni, I'd tell a friend who I was surprised to learn had the same great love and enthusiasm for this film and this universe as I did. Shout out to Andy. To celebrate its 40th anniversary, I thought I'd talk about the film a little bit and offer some thoughts and ideas for you to consider. I'm going to start in a celebratory spirit by saying all the things I think this movie got right. And to celebrate appropriately, I rewatched Dune 1984 for the first time in many years, and it was like seeing an old friend. When the movie starts, the swell of violins from Toto immediately transports you to another world, like a navigator folding space, with the guided meditation of Virginia Madsen's voice, playing Princess Irulan. The prologue immediately establishes the importance of spice, which I think is vital in any adaptation. Then we get a secret report which explains the arrival of the Guild Navigator, appearing before the Emperor, which establishes that they see things through the spice, and that they are aware of the threat. They want Paul killed. You're immediately thrust into a heraldic world, with the added look of technology. Throughout the film, Paul always comments about the water and moisture of Arrakis. This obviously becomes important later.
Water is life.
Why is the shield not yet up?
We've found and removed another sabotage device.
We're finding these sabotage devices too easily.
The constant checking of danger, the upholding of protocol, all of that is there from the book. A lot of the elements were captured pretty well from Frank Herbert's Dune to the screen. I found myself being moved, as I think I always was, by the scene between Paul and his father. It's the first time we get to see the Duke, and a beautiful way to introduce him, in that scene on the balcony. I still get teary-eyed at the end of the film. And it's definitely a film that affected a lot of pop culture. You can read all about that in Max Avery's book A Masterpiece in Disarray. It even affected Denis Villeneuve, who used the Dune soundtrack by Toto in one of his documentaries, so it clearly had an impact on him as well. And you can see a great montage of all the references in pop culture, from Nerdist, edited by Matt. Most of those references are as a direct result of the 1984 film, and its influence on pop culture, more than the Dune book itself. So we have the original movie to thank for keeping the enthusiasm of Dune as a visual medium alive. Without it, we may never have gotten another set of Dune movies. It feels that there are so many iconic lines in this movie.
Father, the sleeper has awakened! I will kill him! He who controls the spice controls the universe!
But it's the visuals, performances, and their delivery that makes them iconic. And the fever dream, visceral imagery really did fill me with wonder. The regality of that emperor and his throne, his stunning throne room. What would the wealthy have in their court? Of course they'd have pets, so the pugs fit right into the idea of Dune, and saving them while all hell is breaking loose, and taking them into war with you, is even better. On a serious note though, I love their accents. The British English further adds to their regality, establishing that this is a world of houses, fiefs, and emperors. Something which the likes of Game of Thrones uses to great effect. I was completely taken by Chani and her beauty.
I am Chani, daughter of Liet. I would not have permitted you to harm my tribe.
And yeah, I probably did have a crush on her. That mesmerizing, enigmatic stare with the repeated phrase of Paul's dream.
Tell me of your homeworld, Uso.
Reminiscent of the Valkyrie from Conan the Barbarian and her repeated phrase.
Do you want to live forever?
Arguably an 80s technique and a product of its time, but still a powerful element that draws you in. It's a question or a prompt that requires a response, an answer, a reconciliation. And Lynch delivers that response by making it rain on Arrakis, bringing the moisture of his homeworld to Dune. A scene which many criticize, but there is actually in-canon references to making it rain on Arrakis found in the book. Before the coming of Mu'addib, the Fremen of Arrakis practiced a religion whose roots in the Muhammad Sari are there for any scholar to see. Many have traced the extensive borrowings from other religions. The most common example is the Hymn to Water, a direct copy from the Orange Catholic liturgical manual, calling for rain clouds, which Arrakis had never seen. So I believe this stimulated the imagination of David Lynch, which is why he wrote the scene of the rain on Arrakis. David Lynch proceeded to show those rain clouds as a statement, both literal and symbolic. Mu'addib will show you things you have never seen. And I think people forget that Frank Herbert himself was involved in the making of David Lynch's Dune, so elements of it definitely have his stamp of approval. Do people think the rain idea came out of thin air? Under Frank Herbert's watch, they made it rain on Arrakis. I like that Paul's powers are unclear and unpredictable. Is it Paul? Is it God? Is it destiny? Is it coincidence? Was it all of those things? We don't know, and that ambiguity fascinated me when I was younger, and it still does today. It stimulated my mind into all of those avenues of questioning, like a mentat. Maybe I liked it because Paul was the hero at the end of the movie. Without the exploration into dangers of charismatic leaders, he was the hero like so many 80s films, and I think that's okay, as a starting point for Dune. Subsequent sequels could have then delved more into why he wasn't necessarily a hero, but we never got that. I liked the hearing of people's thoughts. It gave me, the viewer, the power of telepathy, in a sense, making me my own Mu'addib, or a kind of Bene Gesserit. Again, I found this technique fascinating. Probably the strongest and arguably the coolest thing about this movie was the score. Not only did it capture the 80s enthusiasm, but Toto also beautifully played up to the themes of prophecy and mysticism, with the swelling violins, cellos and choirs. And the added bonus of the Brian Eno track of the prophecy theme really did transport you into another world, just as the film promised, a world beyond your imagination. Child Alia is perhaps the most iconic visual for me from David Lynch's Dune, and still best captures the essence of Child Alia to this day, in a book-accurate sense. Her attire is perhaps the most intriguing thing about her to me. She wears what most women in the Middle East would consider an abba or abaya, a word Frank Herbert actually uses in the Dune books. The clothing is also associated with female religious iconography, but she also wears an igal on her head, which is a kind of rope ring, typically worn by Bedouin men, similar to those depicted in Lawrence of Arabia. Hers is much larger though, perhaps too large for her head, almost like a crown. This outwardly gives the sense that she carries too much on her shoulders, bearing the weight of her ancestors, all those female memories from the moment she was born, due to Jessica taking the water of life, while Alia was still in the womb. This strange choice of attire further adds to the odd and mysterious nature of Alia, giving her the look of maturity of a Bedouin elder, with an abaya of a religious woman, and the veil enveloping a youthful, cherubic face. Perfect iconography for Saint Alia of the Knife. The slow-motion scene of Alia holding her crysknife, which is a scene right out of the book, something I didn't know at the time, is an image forever seared into my mind. And these images set the tone for Dune 2, which sadly never came to be. It would have been incredible to have Alicia Witt return to the role and live up to the character's nickname. And let's talk about those weirding modules. There's a lot of criticism about the weirding modules, but they actually have a foundation from the lore of Dune, and they're not so foreign to the world of Dune either. There is the concept of Oroshnor, one of several sounds empty of general meaning, which the Bene Gesserit implant within the psyches of selected victims for purposes of control. The sensitized person hearing the sound is temporarily immobilized. This comes from the appendix of Dune at the back of the book. And Jessica was advising Paul Atreides to use this against Fade Rautha in the end fight. She told him, "The word sound most frequently used is Arushnor. If this one's prepared, as I strongly suspect, that word uttered in his ear will render his muscles flaccid." Arushnor was a power from the Bene Gesserit, and the Bene Gesserit have the power of the voice. The weirding modules take that idea and weaponizes it, to be used by Paul Muad'Dib and the Fremen warriors. And this power from sound is exactly what the weirding modules are turned into. The ideas of voice and technology aren't foreign ideas to the Fremen either. They send Distrans messages with voice through Cialago bats. The information is stored subliminally by voice, and messages could be retrieved by uttering words or phrases. The message would usually be repeated by the animals as a series of words uttered through vibrations. So I do feel that the weirding modules do have an in-canon basis to some degree. The weirding module's primary goal was to replace martial arts and the weirding way, because David Lynch didn't want to do kung fu in the desert, but it still does have some relation to the story of Dune itself. It still feels like it comes from that same universe, as much as people like to critique it. Maybe I'm okay with weirding modules because the technology fascinated me, and I saw the film before reading the book. I still think weirding modules are interesting though, and everyone remembers Cha-Tsa in some way, with love or hate. But looking at it with a fair and critical eye, perhaps the theatrical cut relies too heavily on the use of the new element of the weirding modules to justify the Fremen victory. And early on the pacing begins to change noticeably as it tries to fit the events of the story in a 2-hour movie. Events appear on screen rather than feeling as though they are written well, but in a way that adds to the realism of that world. The events simply happen without being planned, and the characters are always trying to adapt to those scenarios, so in a way it can still work as a cinematic approach to the adaptation, even though that probably wasn't David Lynch's original intention. The last half of the movie feels more and more dreamlike. A series of visions and scenes appear. Again, this almost fits thematically with Paul's taking of the spice and the effect it has on his mind. Perhaps the film was too ambitious in its final act, with the sandworm attack on Arrakeen against the Emperor and the Sardaukar, in an age where digital effects were still being hand-painted and models used for monsters. I know that David Lynch disowned this movie, but we have to remember he loved working on the movie, he just didn't love the fact that he didn't have final cut on it. And he sold out pretty early in the film process, which he admits, with much regret. By no means would I say it's a perfect film. I think very few films can hold such a title, but it had all the ingredients to make it a brilliant film. And in some ways, we take those ingredients and form that film within our subconscious, making it brilliant within ourselves. Being a kid is loving this movie for seeing parts of my culture in it. Growing up is realizing that perhaps it didn't capture the core theme that it was really meant to, without a sequel that would show the darker side of charismatic leaders. Perhaps it was a setup to then reveal a twist which we never got. I think that would have been a thrilling twist to watch unfold in the franchise back then. Despite all of this, I thank the film for what it did for my childhood, and making me fall in love with Dune. I think I needed Dune 1984 to be exactly what it was, even though it was only skimming the surface of the story in terms of themes. Who is to say that Dune 2 wouldn't have elaborated on Frank Herbert's themes even more? I guess we'll never know. There's a very special reason why this movie had such an effect on me. Among my many other roots, I also have roots in the Middle East. And Dune was a desert world, with people who spoke words that I knew were of significant import, like Mehdi, Usul, Jihad, etc. And extra points to Dune 1984 for using the word jihad in the film.
Bringing the holy war, the Shihad, which will cleanse the universe and bring us out of darkness.
Its main character goes by an Arabic name, Muad'Dib, which was endearing to me and resonated with me, and was, for the first time, someone in the cinema sense that I could relate to on a deeper level. It was something that I could immediately connect with. You know, growing up there was this sense of not quite feeling like you belong, which many experience, but for me it was different. For me, it was not quite feeling like you belong where you were born and brought up, because despite where you know you're from, you know that people would consider you as different and other if they knew your roots. In a way, Paul being different and strange with his Bene Gesserit training from his mother and his strange relationship to the spice and the effect that had on him really made me relate to the character in strange ways. The movie made me think that maybe my people were experiencing various struggles now, but in the future there was a chance that they, along with their culture, had in some way survived. I think as a kid I needed that. Yes, I needed that. It was vital to know that there was a future where I could belong, even if that future was fictional and imperfect. So the movie definitely has an extra meaning for me. It was also like watching the legends of my own culture becoming real before my eyes. Not in the way we'd expect, but far into the future in a much more complex time, like catching a glimpse of a possible future, something Paul Atreides experiences himself. It was like witnessing history, something special that people would have opinions about, and that definitely came true. People who watch David Lynch's Dune with a critical eye after Denis Villeneuve's Dune don't realise what it was like to actually have a Dune movie back then, the impact on the movie upon culture. And I think you should take a moment to really think about that before casually dismissing it. If Denis Villeneuve had the same restrictions, no final cut, a lack of CGI technology, 4K, etc., perhaps the reactions to his Dune would have been the same, and maybe that movie too would have then grown into a cult classic. There are people who hate this movie, and that's fine. There are people who hate the new movies too. Art is subjective after all. But I can't hate something that made me fall in love with this incredible universe, also known as Dune. And that's all I have for you guys. This is the last video of 2024. Lots more to come in the next year, and I'll see you in 2025. I just want to thank David Lynch for his efforts, and thank all the cast and crew who worked on this movie, something that became a core memory for me. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see you soon.